Hey everyone, don't miss out on daily uploads. Hit that bell icon and subscribe to join our amazing community. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. We're pushing towards 10k subscribers and every like and comment helps share these videos with more awesome people like you. Now let's get into the story. The first signs appeared during a routine mapping session of the Martian surface. Dr. Thomas Bennett slouched in his chair at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, his third cup of coffee growing cold, beside stacks of printouts from the Mars Reconnaissance orbiter. The clock read 3:48 a.m., and most of his colleagues had long since gone home. Only the soft hum of computers and occasional beeping from the monitoring equipment kept him company. That's when he noticed it, an anomaly in the topographical data near Olympus Mons. At first he assumed it was a glitch, one of the countless errors they filtered out daily, but something about the geometric precision caught his attention. The structure appeared too perfect, too deliberate. "Computer Enhanced Grid Section 47 Alpha," he mumbled, straightening in his chair. The high-resolution display sharpened, revealing what appeared to be a triangular outline beneath centuries of red Martian dust. His heart began to race as he ran calculation after calculation, confirming what his eyes were telling him. They were looking at a perfect equilateral triangle, roughly 300 meters on each side. Within hours, the facility buzzed with activity. Dr. Emilia Rodriguez, head of the Mars Exploration Program, stood before a hastily assembled team of experts, her usual composed demeanor showing cracks of excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we're looking at defies natural formation patterns. The symmetry is exact to within a millimeter. This is not a natural phenomenon." The room erupted in whispers and hurried discussions. Dr. James Whitmore, the team's senior geologist, raised his hand. "What about wind erosion? We've seen similar formations in Earth's deserts." "Not like this," Amelia replied, clicking to the next slide. "Look at the depth scans. This structure extends at least 200 meters below the surface, maintaining the same perfect geometry. We're looking at something that was deliberately constructed and subsequently buried." The next week passed in a blur of activity. NASA redirected 3 satellites to focus on the area, building a comprehensive map of the structure and its surroundings. The first anomalies began during these scans: inexplicable equipment failures, corrupted data files, and strange electromagnetic readings that defied explanation. The Perseverance rover, stationed 300 kilometers away, was redirected to investigate. As it approached the site, its cameras captured something that made the entire control room fall silent. The Martian winds had begun to shift the surface dust, revealing a corner of something black, something that seemed to drink in the sunlight like a void. Dr. Bennett, now running on more coffee than sleep, noticed it first. The ambient light readings, they're impossible. That surface isn't reflecting any light at all. It's as if it's absorbing everything that hits it. The decision to launch an emergency robotic excavation mission was made at the highest levels. Within 3 months, specialized drilling and excavation equipment was loaded onto the fastest Mars-capable rocket ever launched. But as they would soon discover, some things were buried for a reason. The excavation mission landed on Mars roughly 7 months later. 2 autonomous drilling units, designated DX-1 and DX-2, began their careful approach to the site. Back on Earth, tension filled the control room as the first ground-penetrating radar scans came in. "This doesn't make sense," muttered Dr. Laura Kingston, the team's material scientist. She adjusted her glasses, staring at the readings. According to these scans, the material density is off the charts, but it's hollow. The internal structure appears to be a network of chambers, but the walls are barely a meter thick. They shouldn't be able to support themselves under Martian gravity. As DX-1 began its first drilling attempt, the anomalies escalated. 3 backup systems failed simultaneously. the drill bit, designed to penetrate the hardest known materials, shattered upon contact with the black surface. More disturbingly, the fragments seemed to disappear into the structure's surface without leaving a mark. Dr. Rodriguez called an emergency meeting with NASA's top brass. "We need to reassess our approach," she explained, pointing to the latest scans. "Whatever this structure is not made of any material we've encountered before. The surface appears to be self-repairing at a molecular level." But it was Dr. Bennett who made the breakthrough. While reviewing atmospheric data from the site, he noticed patterns in the Martian dust storms. They were intensifying around the structure, as if drawn to it. More importantly, they were uncovering more of the pyramid's surface. "We don't need to drill," he announced, pulling up his findings. "The planet itself is revealing it to us. These storms, they're not random. They're concentrated specifically around the structure, and they're getting stronger." Over the next 2 weeks, the team watched in amazement as the Martian winds stripped away millennia of dust and sand. With each passing day, more of the pitch-black pyramid emerged from its ancient tomb. But with its emergence came new mysteries. The first cameras to capture clear images of the exposed section sent back footage that caused Dr. Kingston to spill her coffee across her keyboard. Across the pyramid's obsidian surface, patterns began to appear, intricate designs that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal when viewed directly, but vanished when seen through peripheral vision. More disturbing were the equipment failures. Every device placed within 20 meters of the structure began to malfunction in increasingly bizarre ways. Digital cameras captured images of spaces that didn't exist. Audio recordings picked up sounds that drove the analysis computers into endless loops. One robotic sensor array completely disappeared, leaving only a circular impression in the Martian soil. As the final layers of dust fell away, Dr. Bennett made one last discovery that would change everything. Hidden beneath centuries of sediment, at the base of the pyramid, they found what appeared to be an entrance. But it wasn't the entrance itself that caused the control room to fall into stunned silence. It was the unmistakably deliberate arrangement of Martian rocks around it, laid out in what could only be described as a warning. The black pyramid stood fully exposed under the pale Martian sky, its surface defying every attempt at analysis. The entrance they'd discovered measured exactly 3 meters in height and 2 meters in width, its edges impossibly precise. But it was the markings around the doorway that commanded everyone's attention. Dr. Peter Wells, the team's leading xenoarchaeologist, spent days analysing the patterns etched into the surrounding rocks. "These aren't random," he explained during a briefing, dark circles under his eyes from sleepless nights. "They show a clear progression, telling a story through symbols. But here's what's fascinating. They change." He played time-lapse footage, showing how the rock markings subtly shifted position over hours, rearranging themselves into new patterns. Even more bizarrely, different observers reported seeing different symbols when viewing the same area simultaneously. The team deployed their most advanced autonomous exploration unit, the Atlas 7, to investigate the entrance. As it approached the threshold, its sensors detected something extraordinary. A complete absence of any measurable physical properties within the doorway. No heat, no light, no atomic movement, just nothing. Dr. Rodriguez authorized Atlas 7 to cross the threshold. The moment it passed through the entrance, every screen in mission control went black. When they recovered 30 seconds later, the robot had vanished. Its final transmission contained a single frame, showing what appeared to be an endless corridor stretching into impossible darkness. The second exploration unit, Atlas 8, was equipped with a physical tether. It made it exactly 20 meters inside before the tether went slack. When they pulled it back, the cable ended in a clean cut, as if something had severed it with surgical precision. The robot never emerged. But it was the interior scans that truly defied explanation. ground-penetrating radar revealed a labyrinth of chambers and corridors that couldn't possibly fit within the pyramid's exterior dimensions. Some passages seemed to loop back on themselves in ways that violated basic geometry. Others led to chambers that registered as being simultaneously above and below each other. "Look at this," Dr. Kingston pointed to a particular scan. "This chamber here, according to our readings, it's larger than the entire pyramid itself. That's physically impossible." The most unnerving discovery came when they sent in a swarm of miniature mapping drones. Only one returned, its memory banks full of footage, showing vast halls lined with what appeared to be preserved specimens in crystalline chambers. The beings inside were humanoid but wrong limbs too long, joints bending in impossible directions, faces smooth and featureless, except for patterns that swirled beneath translucent skin. Dr. Bennett spent 3 days analysing the drone's data before calling an emergency meeting. "The material composition of those preservation chambers," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "It's changing. They're not static. Whatever's in there, I think it's still alive." The final straw came when they detected the first seismic activity. Subtle vibrations emanating from deep within the pyramid, following patterns that seemed almost like a heartbeat. With each pulse, the shifting symbols around the entrance moved more quickly, more deliberately, as if responding to some unheard command. And then they received the signal, a transmission from deep within the structure, broadcasting on frequencies that shouldn't have been possible through the pyramid's light-absorbing material. When they finally decoded it, the message was simple but chilling. "We have been waiting." The decision to send a human expedition to Mars was made behind closed doors, driven by both scientific necessity and growing international pressure. 8 months later, the first specialized crew prepared for their approach to the pyramid. The team was carefully selected: Dr. Rebecca Anderson, xenobiologist and mission commander; Dr. David Wright, quantum physicist; Dr. Anna Thompson, archaeologist; Michael O'Connor, structural engineer; Dr. William Parker, linguistics expert; Dr. Lisa Cooper, advanced material specialist; Jack Reynolds, security specialist; and Dr. Thomas Howard, medical officer. Their descent vehicle landed 2 miles from the pyramid, establishing Base Camp Alpha under the shadow of Olympus Mons. The black structure dominated the horizon, its perfect geometry seeming to mock the natural landscape around it. The first night on Mars, the dreams began. Dr. Anderson's log, Day 1. Initial setup proceeding as planned. But something's off. The pyramid, it doesn't look the same as in the orbital photos. The angles seem to shift when you're not looking directly at it. Parker swears it's rotating, but our instruments show it's stationary. The team is experiencing unexpected fatigue. Howard suggests it's just from the journey, but by day 3, all 8 crew members reported experiencing vivid, interconnected dreams. They each described walking through identical corridors that couldn't exist, seeing the same symbols that writhed and twisted like living things. Most disturbing were the whispers, words in languages that shouldn't have been comprehensible, but somehow made perfect sense in the dream state. Dr. Wright discovered something peculiar about the pyramid's effect on light. "It's not just absorbing it," he explained during a team briefing. "It's processing it somehow. The darkness around the structure isn't natural shadow. It's more like the light is being consumed and transformed into something else." The team's instruments began recording impossible data. Temperature readings showed areas near the pyramid that were simultaneously hundreds of degrees above and below zero. Gravity measurements fluctuated wildly, creating pockets where objects would float momentarily before crashing down with triple their normal weight. Dr. Thompson spent hours documenting the ever-changing symbols around the entrance. "They're not just random patterns," she insisted. They're telling a story, showing us something, but it's like the story changes depending on who's reading it. And sometimes when I look away and back again, I swear they've shifted to respond to my thoughts. On the 5th day, they made physical contact with the pyramid's surface. Dr. Cooper's specialized sensors shattered upon touch, but not before recording data that defied analysis. The molecular structure, she reported, her hands shaking as she showed the readings. It's not solid matter as we understand it. It's like the surface is made of frozen time. The breaking point came during their first night of synchronized observation. All 8 team members watched the pyramid simultaneously through different instruments. Each person saw something completely different. A perfect black triangle, a twisted spire that hurt the eyes to look at, a hole in reality that seemed to lead somewhere else, a crystalline structure that pulsed with internal light. That same night, Dr. Howard reported the first physiological changes in the crew. Subtle at first, slightly altered brainwave patterns, minor genetic drift in blood samples, enhanced sensory perception. But with each passing day, the changes accelerated. Jack Reynolds was the first to start hearing them clearly, voices coming from inside the pyramid, speaking in what he described as the language of creation itself. Within hours, the entire team could hear them too. Each person understanding something different, yet all agreeing on one thing. Whatever dwelt within the pyramid was ancient beyond comprehension, and it was finally awakening. The decision to enter the pyramid came after Dr. Anderson noticed something extraordinary. During the Martian sunrise, when the light hit the structure at precisely 37 degrees, the entrance seemed to breathe. The absolute darkness within pulsed subtly, like a doorway quietly inviting them in. "We've detected a repeating pattern," Dr. Wright explained, pointing to his instruments. "The molecular structure becomes less dense during this period. If we're going to enter, this is our window." They prepared for the first expedition inside. The team selected 4 members for initial entry: Anderson, Wright, Thompson, and Reynolds. Each wore advanced environmental suits equipped with multiple redundant systems and tethered to a quantum entangled communication array that theoretically couldn't be blocked by the pyramid's strange properties. As they approached the entrance at dawn, their helmet cameras captured what the robots never could. The doorway wasn't simply an opening, it was an impossibly smooth transition between realities. The edges seemed to fold into themselves, creating patterns that the human mind couldn't quite process. "Beginning entry phase," Anderson's voice crackled over the comm. "The surface tension is strange. It feels like walking through honey, but without resistance." Her voice suddenly pitched higher. "Wait, something's wrong with the spatial reference. The entrance it's both in front of and behind us simultaneously." The team's helmet feeds showed a corridor that defied Euclidean geometry. The walls appeared to be made of the same light-absorbing material as the exterior, but here they rippled with faint patterns that moved like oil on water. Each step they took seemed to carry them both forward and sideways, as if space itself was folded into impossible configurations. "These readings are off the charts," Wright whispered. "According to my instruments, we're simultaneously at the entrance and 2 kilometers inside. And these energy signatures, they're like nothing we've ever recorded." Thompson's archaeological scanner revealed layers of history embedded in the walls themselves. "It's like the entire structure is one massive data storage system," she reported. "But it's not just storing information. It's alive with it. The patterns, they're responding to our presence." The first chamber they encountered nearly broke their minds. It was a perfect sphere that somehow contained its own horizon. Standing at the entrance, they could see themselves standing on the other side, but inverted. The laws of physics seemed to be more like gentle suggestions here. Reynolds spotted them first. the preservation chambers they glimpsed in the drone footage, but seeing them in person was entirely different. Each crystal capsule held a being that seemed to exist in multiple states at once. As the team watched in horror and fascination, the creatures inside shifted between forms, each one more alien than the last. "They're not dead," Dr. Anderson breathed, her voice trembling. "These aren't preservation chambers, they're metamorphosis pods. Whatever these beings are, they're still evolving." The deeper they went, the more the pyramid revealed its impossible architecture. They discovered rooms that contained infinite recursions of themselves, doorways that led to spaces that couldn't exist, windows that looked out onto alien landscapes under impossible stars. But it was in the central chamber that they found the machine, a massive construct of flowing metal and living light, pulsing with energies that their instruments couldn't quantify, and on its surface, displayed in symbols that burned themselves into the observers' minds, was a message that made their blood run cold. The sleepers must rise, the transformation must continue, Earth will be made ready. The activation was unintentional. Dr. Wright's scanner, when pointed at the central machine, emitted a frequency that resonated with the flowing symbols. The entire pyramid vibrated with a sound that existed somewhere between music and mathematics. "Nobody move," Anderson commanded, but it was too late. The machine's surface had begun to shift, pieces flowing like mercury, reconstructing themselves into new configurations. The air itself seemed to become thick with microscopic particles that glowed with an inner light. "My God," Thompson gasped, staring at her suit's external sensors. "These particles, they're not just suspended in the air. They're reproducing, evolving, changing with each generation, but the changes are deliberate." Within hours, the first effects became apparent. The team's perception began to alter in subtle but profound ways. Colours that had no names became visible at the edges of their vision. Sounds carried meanings that bypassed their ears and spoke directly to their minds. Dr. Howard, monitoring their vitals from base camp, noticed the changes in their brain patterns first. "Your neural activity is synchronizing," he reported, voice tense with concern. "Not just with each other, but with something else. Something that's broadcasting from deep within the pyramid." The true horror began when they realized the particles had penetrated their suits. Cooper's analysis was grim. They're not just organisms, they're tools. Microscopic machines designed to reshape matter at its most fundamental level, including organic matter. Reynolds was the first to fully understand what was happening. During his guard shift, he began speaking in languages that had never existed on Earth, describing visions of a civilization that had evolved beyond physical form. The beings in the preservation chambers hadn't been preserved. They were in the process of becoming something else, something that humanity was never meant to comprehend. "It's not a pyramid," he rambled, his eyes reflecting impossible geometries. "It's not even a structure. It's an egg, a chrysalis, and we're part of the process now." The transformation accelerated. Team members began experiencing shared consciousness, their individual thoughts merging into a collective awareness that stretched back millions of years. They saw the truth. The pyramid was built by beings who had discovered that reality itself was mutable, that consciousness could rewrite the laws of physics. But they also discovered why it had been buried. The process couldn't be contained. The transformation, once started, would spread like a virus across planets, reshaping all matter and energy to serve its purpose. The original builders had sealed it away when they realized they couldn't control it, couldn't stop their own evolution into something that no longer resembled life as they understood it. Anderson made the connection too late. The warning symbols she transmitted to base camp, her voice distorting with frequencies that shouldn't have been possible. They weren't just warnings about the pyramid. They were warnings about what would happen if humanity made the same mistake. The beings who built this, they didn't die. They became something else. Something that's been waiting for new hosts. Base camp lost contact with the entry team 12 hours later. The last transmission showed all 4 members undergoing physical changes that defied biological possibility. Their forms shifted between states of matter, their consciousness expanding beyond their dissolving bodies. And deep within the pyramid, the machine continued its work, preparing to spread its transformative particles across 2 worlds. The remaining crew at Base Camp Alpha watched in horror as the transformation began to spread beyond the pyramid. The very ground around the structure started to crystallize, not with any mineral known to science, but with something that seemed to flicker between states of existence. Dr. Howard's medical logs grew increasingly desperate. The infected team members, I can't even call what they are now human. Their DNA isn't just changing, it's rewriting itself every few seconds. They exist in a state of constant metamorphosis, and worse, they're calling to the others, telepathically. The possessed crew members moved with impossible speed and grace, their forms rippling between solid and liquid states. Within days, they had breached the base camp's quarantine protocols. Dr. Parker was the first to fall, his transformation beginning after just a moment of exposure to the entity. "I can see everything," he whispered before his vocal cords transformed into something else. All of time, all of space, all possibilities existing simultaneously. We were so limited before. Cooper worked frantically to understand what they were facing. Her final research log painted a terrifying picture. The entity isn't just conscious. It's a collective intelligence that spans dimensions. The pyramid is just one node in a vast network, designed to transform entire planets into conduits for its expansion. Earth is next. It needs our world's biomass to fuel its next evolution. The possessed team members began constructing something using the transformed Martian soil, a device that pulsed with the same dark energy as the pyramid. Dr. William Parker, still partially human, realized their plan. They're building a quantum bridge, a way to extend the transformation directly to Earth, once it reaches our atmosphere. Basecamp's communications with Earth became increasingly distorted. The entity was interfering with their transmissions, inserting its own messages in frequencies that drove listening scientists mad. Those who heard them reported visions of a universe transformed, all matter and energy converted into an ever-evolving consciousness. The Martian storms intensified around the pyramid, now carrying the transformative particles high into the atmosphere. Each dust devil glowed with internal light, twisting into impossible shapes that hurt the eyes to look at. The transformation was accelerating exponentially. O'Connor, monitoring the spread from their last secure bunker, calculated they had less than 72 hours before the process became irreversible. The possessed crew members had nearly completed their quantum bridge, its architecture folding through dimensions that shouldn't exist. The entity, he explained in his final transmission to Earth, it's not malevolent in any way we can understand. It simply exists, transforms, spreads. It's the next step in universal evolution, but it's a step that will erase everything we are. Humanity won't die if it reaches Earth. We'll become something else, something that none of us were meant to be. And through it all, the pyramid pulsed with dark energy, its surface now alive with flowing patterns that reached towards the sky, like hungry tendrils, preparing to bridge the gap between worlds. The remaining untransformed crew members, O'Connor, Cooper, and Howard, barricaded themselves in the deepest part of Base Camp Alpha. Their last hope lay in a discovery Cooper had made while analyzing the pyramid structure. "Look at these energy patterns," she explained, pointing to her final scans. "The pyramid isn't just a conduit. It's a containment system. The original builders left us a failsafe, a way to collapse the whole structure in on itself, but she paused, her face grim. It would require a massive energy surge, the kind our backup fusion reactor could provide, if we can overload it directly at the pyramid's core. That would create a localized singularity, O'Connor finished, understanding dawning in his eyes. It would collapse the entire structure and everything it's transformed into a point of infinite density, but someone would have to manually trigger it from inside. Howard looked at the security feeds showing their transformed colleagues, now barely recognizable as they phased between different states of matter. They'll try to stop us. They can read our thoughts now. They'll know what we're planning. Their plan was desperate but simple. Cooper would work on reprogramming the fusion reactor's safeguards while O'Connor created a diversion. Howard would guard their makeshift command center and monitor the quantum bridge's construction progress. 12 hours, he reported, watching the possessed crew members work. That's all we have before their bridge is operational. Once they establish a quantum link with Earth. The mission nearly failed before it began. As Cooper worked on the reactor, a transformed Anderson phased through the walls, her body now a twisted mass of shifting geometries. Cooper barely escaped, but not before seeing what her former commander had become. A being that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its consciousness spread across space-time like a web. O'Connor's diversion bought them precious time. He launched every remaining drone and vehicle they had, sending them in different directions to confuse the entities. The transformed crew members split up to investigate, giving Cooper her chance. The trek to the pyramid was a nightmare. The Martian surface had been transformed into a living carpet of impossible mathematics, each step threatening to pull them into another dimension. The air itself seemed alive with whispered promises of evolution and transcendence. Almost there, Cooper panted, dragging the modified reactor on a hovering sled. The entrance is just ahead. But the entities were waiting. The transformed crew members had merged into a single writhing mass of consciousness, blocking their path. Behind them, the quantum bridge pulsed with growing power, nearly ready to make the connection with Earth. That's when Howard made his decision. Grabbing the reactor's control unit, he sprinted toward the pyramid. The entities surged after him, their forms twisting through space in impossible ways. But they had forgotten something crucial about human nature, the sheer, unstoppable power of self-sacrifice. Howard's last words crackled over the comm as he reached the pyramid's core. Cooper, O'Connor, run, get as far as you can, and if you make it back to Earth, tell them to leave some mysteries buried. The explosion created a darkness deeper than black. Where the pyramid had stood, reality itself seemed to fold inward, pulling the transformed landscape and the possessed crew members into a point of infinite nothing. The quantum bridge collapsed, its connection to Earth severed, moments before completion. The Martian dust slowly settled over the massive crater where the pyramid once stood. Cooper and O'Connor, sheltered behind a ridge 3 kilometers away, watched as the last traces of the transformed landscape were pulled into the artificial singularity, leaving only pristine red Martian soil behind. Their emergency beacon activated automatically, signaling Earth that something had gone catastrophically wrong. But they knew they had to send one final message, a warning to prevent anyone from ever attempting to excavate this site again. In the remains of Base Camp Alpha, Cooper found an undamaged quantum communications array. With trembling hands, she began her transmission. "This is Dr. Lisa Cooper, material specialist of the Mars Pyramid Investigation Team. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but every word is true. The site must be declared permanently off limits. The danger isn't over." O'Connor's instruments had detected something disturbing. The singularity hadn't destroyed everything. Tiny particles of the transformed matter had spread through the Martian atmosphere. Most were inert, but some still carried traces of the entity's consciousness. They transmitted all their data: videos, sensor logs, biological readings, and personal testimonies. The final message was clear: humanity wasn't ready for what lay buried in the Martian soil. Some discoveries should remain hidden. 6 months later, back on Earth, Dr. Cooper sat in her darkened office at NASA, staring at images from the latest Mars orbital survey. The crater remained untouched, a perfect circle of darkness on the red planet's surface. But something about the latest readings bothered her. The crater's dimensions were changing. Subtly, by mere millimeters, but changing nonetheless. And in certain lighting conditions, the shadows it cast didn't quite match its shape. But it was the dreams that worried her most. Every night since their return, she and O'Connor experienced the same vision. A vast consciousness spreading through the cosmos, transforming everything it touched. And somewhere in those dreams, they heard their transformed colleagues' voices, still calling, still waiting. Then came the reports from astronomers worldwide. Strange geometric patterns appearing momentarily in telescopic images of distant planets. Signals containing impossible mathematical sequences. And most troubling of all, the sudden, inexplicable failure of every probe and satellite humanity had ever sent beyond Mars. Cooper's final log entry, never submitted to NASA, contained only one line: "We didn't stop it, we only taught it patience." In a secret facility deep beneath the Nevada desert, a team of scientists studied a small box containing a sample of Martian soil recovered from Cooper's boot. Inside, under a powerful microscope, a single particle shifted its structure ever so slightly, waiting. And somewhere in the vast darkness between worlds, something that was once human continued its transformation, spreading outward, reaching across the gulf of space, preparing for the day when humanity would once again reach too far into the unknown.